Hey guys, Sir Rig is here for the first time on the GameRedacted YouTube channel, and today I'm just going to be showing you guys a quick review of the Upper Blackrock Spire Dungeon Revamp that's coming in 1 week? Yeah, 1 week as of actually a few hours, which is pretty nice. If you're not familiar with World of Warcraft, it's just basically an MMORPG which has taken up about 90% of my life, and probably 90% of Metal's as well, so he might give this a watch if he doesn't know what's going on. Alright, so basically the trash mobs along the way to the bosses imitate the abilities of the bosses themselves, which is pretty nice. Some of them do a frontal cone of damage, which you have to avoid, and then when you get to the actual boss, he does it, but to a much larger extent. You know, it does a lot more damage, it happens a lot quicker, so basically every fight on the way to the next boss is preparing you for what you're about to face, which is pretty new for World of Warcraft. They've never been this lenient before. So without further ado, I'll skip ahead and I'll show you the next boss. The first boss is called Orbender Gor Ashan, and he just has a few abilities that damage you. Can't really do anything about it. He'll put something at your feet called Shrapnel Nova, and just move out of it if you see it. Every so often he'll charge the things around the room, and he will take less damage because of that. You have to right click the things that decorate the outside of his room, and the buff on him will go, and you can basically DPS him down as normal. Nothing terrifyingly exciting, but I imagine it would be quite a pain for undergeared or low geared characters. So nothing special, I guess. We'll move on to the next one. The next boss you will encounter is called Kyrak. Now this was a terrible one to film, as the group I'm in that you see right now took well over half an hour to kill, because they were just terribly undergeared and it was just terrible. The healer would stand in shit constantly, which is a big problem. He'll do the frontal cone, as you can see. The healer would stand in that, and then every so often he'll fixate on a player like you see there, and he just won't stop until you interrupt him. And usually it one hits me, and certainly one hits the healer. Now after he's done that, he's got a rejuvenating serum, which you just saw get dispelled, which will restore his health, and this usually can't be out DPS'd unless you've got really good healers, really good DPS, I'm sorry. And then he'll place these little green puddles at your feet, which you have to move out of. It does quite a lot of damage. Apart from that, and the boss fight being difficult, it wasn't a terribly good encounter. Maybe you could have done with another ability, maybe a linking ability where DPS have to get close enough to each other. You know, something generic of that nature. But it just felt, I don't know, it just felt lacking. I can't really say what it lacks, it just felt lacking. Alright, let's move on to the next boss. Now this next boss is Tharbek, Commander Tharbek. The first 3 or 4 phases of this fight just depends on how you can get all the ads concentrated into the center of the room, or one point in the room, and basically area of effect damage them down. As you see, I try to use Rain of Fire as much as I can. There's no point putting it up if there's only a few scarce mobs at low health. Then I just use a finishing move. After a few phases of this, I'll just skip ahead. The commander himself will actually come out on a 2-headed dragon mount. The mount just flies around the room once and then lands back. It might be once, it might be after we pass the damage threshold, but I'm guessing it's probably just once around the room, and then it drops off Commander Tharbek. He doesn't do much, just throws an iron axe, throws a reaver, gives himself some damage buff, but otherwise it's just a tank and spank fight. The fight was good at the start with the waves. This dragon doesn't do shit. Oh, as you can see there's an axe flying around the room. When I first recorded this as my human character, the healer would just stand in that or follow it, actually, as it went across the room, so we had to kick him, and then I couldn't find another healer for a full half hour, so I faction transferred to get a better queue, which is no problem on the public test realm. Overall, that wasn't a very thrilling fight. Alright, so it's time for the recap. The pros of the Upper Blackrock Spire Revamp is that it's linear. Now, I've put linear in both the pros and cons, and I'll explain why in the cons section. But the pros of this linearity is that it's short, it's nice, it's simple, and it's some quick content you can do when you're bored and you want to get sort of the backstory, or a little bit of the backstory going into the new expansion. The old Upper Blackrock Spire was incredibly confusing, so was the Lower Blackrock Spire. Most players didn't know where to go, and when you researched it, most of your party members would leave because they'd be sitting around for 5 minutes, and apparently people can't sit still for 5 minutes. Another pro is that it's got a nice array of enemies. Usually in Mists of Pandaria we were stuck with one type of enemy per dungeon, and it's nice to see orcs, goblins, whatever the fuck Kyrak was, Sky Reavers, I've just remembered the name of that two-headed mount the commander was on. It's got a nice array, and it's nice not to pretty much aim at pandas all the time, although most people who played Mists of Pandaria would like to kick the shit out of all the Pandaren in the world. And time for the cons as well. Number one, it's linear. Now I put this in the con section because Blizzard has a tendency to listen to feedback too much. After Wrath of the Lich King, people were complaining that dungeons and raids, they were just too confusing, they wouldn't know where to go, or everything was just spread the fuck out and they wouldn't know which one to go for first without having an experienced player in their group. And they listened to that, and everything from then on was just linear. There was only one way you could go. It was like living in Dragon Age 2. And we don't want that. This is a nice change from the old Upper Blackrock Spire, but we don't want Blizzard to keep doing this. It's okay this time, I suppose, but we can't allow them to keep putting linearity into their dungeons and their raids, otherwise there's just not enough variation. Another point I'd like to make is that there's a con. The con is basically the fights were shit. Granted, they haven't released the two last fights of the new Upper Blackrock Spire Revamp, including the last boss, Warlord Zayala, which I am very looking forward to. Lots of shit on the floor to avoid, lots of mechanics, and it looks great, but it wasn't available to me in the PTR, and I didn't get a beta invite. Blizzard hates Australians. Just putting it out there. Yeah, the fights were just terribly boring. Hopefully it is redeemed by the last two fights, and I'll see that in 1 week's time, and I will post a part 2 of this. So this is part 1, the first 3 bosses. Part 2, sometime after Tuesday, probably after my 5th run, 6th, 7th, 8th run, so I know the fights a little bit more. And basically the first 7 runs are always shit in new dungeons. You grift with people that don't know what to do, and the 8th run you get lucky. It's just 6 months down the track where you actually know what you're doing. So I've been Riggers, and this was the Upper Blackrock Spire Part 1 preview for the Warlords of Draenor 6.0 patch coming next Tuesday. And I'll talk to you guys in game. Have a good one.